My golden child brother hired a private investigator to prove I'm a failure. But, can you believe my golden brother, the family favorite, actually hired a private investigator just to expose me as a failure? The irony, the absolute shock, was that all he uncovered was my multi-million-dollar success. Growing up in our quaint little village, where everyone knew everyone, was a double-edged sword. My two siblings and I were raised by a father who was all hard work and no emotions, now eyeing retirement, and a mother who was his complete opposite, a staunch guardian of tradition and our home. They came from deeply religious, traditional families, and I do love them, but I always carried this heavy weight of not measuring up. It felt like I was perpetually seen as the family's biggest disappointment, and that judgment, unspoken but ever-present, cut deep. Then there's my older brother, the undisputed golden boy. He's 40, married to a quiet woman, and they have two sons who are, to put it gently, a handful obsessed with rough sports. He's a car salesman, and somehow he's appointed himself my life coach. But his guidance always felt like a condescending project he couldn't quite fix, a constant reminder that I was broken and should be grateful for any crumbs of his time. He'd paint this perfect picture of his life, his athletic kids, his powerboat, his ATVs, but his advice was just thinly veiled boasting about his big house, his fancy cars, and his trophy wife. Every word he spoke just made me feel even more isolated, even more inadequate. At school, I was the sensitive kid, the one who cried easily, always seemed to have an excuse when things went wrong. I wasn't tough, not athletic, so I was an easy target for teasing, always left out. My asthma just added to that feeling of alienation, a constant reminder of my physical limitations. What hurt even more was my parents' dismissal of it, as if it wasn't a real medical problem. And deep down, I've battled depression for as long as I can remember. I wasn't the child who could run down a field or throw a football straight. My parents often compared me to my brother, openly remarking that I wasn't as smart or outgoing. School was a constant struggle. I barely scraped by with a 2.5 GPA in high school. I managed to save some money and enrolled in college, but I dropped out in my second year. That decision, as you can imagine, sparked a huge family controversy. My younger sister, she was the family princess. I didn't know her well when I left. She was just a teenager then. Now, as an adult, I see she's not a bad person, just a bit overindulged. But maybe it's easier for her to join in, because she often treats me with the same dismissive air as my parents and brother. She had the perfect life path, a beautiful wedding at 19, 3 kids. Ironically, I find myself identifying most with her middle child. Maybe it's because she's also a middle child, she gets teased a lot, and her struggles seem to echo my own. I feel a strange connection there, like I understand her better than I ever understood my sister. After college, I truly started to embrace my inner nerd. For over 7 years, I worked at a local comic book and video game store, a place I absolutely loved until it closed. Even now, my parents still act like I'm stocking shelves there. But that store was where everything changed. It was where I met another geek, someone with ambitions as big as mine. Together, we co-founded an IT support business, and it took off. Eventually, my partner decided to sell our company to a larger corporation. I was bought out with a combination of cash and stock options, and honestly, it worked out incredibly well. From there, I launched several side projects and made a number of very smart, very profitable investments. I don't like to brag, but I now have over $1 million in assets. Today, I'm the CTO of a brand new private startup. Despite my wealth, I live a very humble life. My comfortable 2-bedroom house in a great neighborhood is furnished almost entirely with used pieces, and I still drive a beat-up 15-year-old Saturn. My life is hectic, and I'm currently not in a relationship, but I see my therapist regularly. Like my lifelong battle with melancholy and asthma, I also grapple with drinking, a struggle my parents dismiss as all in my head, refusing to take it seriously. It's hard, constantly feeling misunderstood. But through all the ups and downs, the private battles, I've managed to carve out a genuinely prosperous career for myself. Every Sunday night, without fail, my parents expect me at their dinner table. They live across the state, a brutal 90 to 120-minute drive each way, devouring half my weekend. But they still seem to think that as an unmarried mental case, my brother's affectionate term for me, I have nothing better to do. These dinners are always grueling. For 3 solid hours, I'm subjected to unsolicited lectures on how to get married, start a family, and finally become a proper adult. Or worse, I'm forced to listen to endless chatter about my brother's latest huge sale at the car dealership, the undisputed star of the table. They never outright called me a mooch, but the implication was always there, hanging heavy in the air if I ever dared to skip a dinner. It was frustrating, bewildering, and in therapy, I often questioned why I even kept going. My family had this incredible talent for downplaying or outright misrepresenting every single one of my accomplishments. Back home, people genuinely still believed I worked at that game store that closed years ago. My brother, with his successful car sales career, was always seen as more mature, more gregarious. Meanwhile, I was constantly mocked for my retail experience. It was an impossible chasm to bridge, trying to explain my real life, my true achievements, to them. My passion for games and comics was dismissed as immature entertainment, and any attempt to discuss my genuine expertise in technology was immediately overshadowed. My brother would jump in, interrupt me, babble about something he barely understood, and act like I knew nothing. I usually just stayed silent. I was terrified to correct him, because then I'd have to explain my work, defend my knowledge, and secretly, I feared they still wouldn't value my career, that it would only cement their dismissive opinion of me. I'll admit, I've had my struggles, and sometimes I've been a complete mess. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming. But then last month, everything changed. My brother, the self-appointed guardian of my life, managed to get his hands on my personal information. The truth? He'd actually hired a private investigator, claiming it was a background check on my employment. I had this chilling suspicion he was planning an intervention with my parents, ready to expose me as the colossal failure he believed I was. They were utterly, completely unprepared for what they actually found. Instead of a rundown flat and a dead-end job, they uncovered my real value, my financial success, all my private information. The irony was almost comical, given that I work in cybersecurity. Receiving notifications about unauthorized attempts to access my credit report allowed me to connect the dots, and I even tracked the source of the hack. Everything clicked into place after that revelation, and now I had to deal with my family's sudden, totally unanticipated shift in how they saw me. It was a lot to process, especially given our history of miscommunication and constant undervaluation. Furious, absolutely enraged by this egregious breach of my privacy, I decided to turn the tables. I hired the exact same private detective firm to look into my brother's finances. What they uncovered was a spectacular house of cards. My golden boy brother was living wildly beyond his means. The investigation dug up a file with Child Protective Services, several previous arrests for DWI and public intoxication, and a string of domestic disturbance calls. He was drowning in scheduled back payments to the IRS and somehow juggling 3 mortgage loans on his house. While there were no current charges, his credit was an absolute, unmitigated disaster. In stark contrast, my parents, I discovered, were as modest and pragmatic with money as I'd always known them to be. I was so consumed with preparing for the inevitable confrontation at our next family dinner, hoping it would finally create the rift I craved, that I honestly didn't even bother to check on my sister's situation. But the moment I walked into dinner, the atmosphere was completely alien, nothing like I'd imagined. My parents suddenly were treating me with this bizarre veneration, as if I was the golden child now. This obvious shift drove my brother into a furious rage. Midway through the meal, desperate to reclaim his shattered reputation, he launched into a tirade of boasting about recent sales commissions and some phantom promotion. I simply offered him my congratulations, then, in what I thought was a tactful manner, brought up his debt, his IRS problems, and his severely stretched credit. In essence, I celebrated his accomplishments, while simultaneously laying bare his financial ruin. The entire scene was darkly gloomy. My parents' sudden, almost performative change in behavior towards me felt forced, artificial, making our already strained family dynamic even more excruciatingly awkward. At first, my brother outright denied everything. That's when I handed him a copy of the report, pointing out that by using that very agency to investigate me, he'd inadvertently suggested it himself. And honestly, for a brief moment, that felt incredibly satisfying. My parents, who reacted with dramatic shock and then reprimanded him, were clearly aware of his mess too. The whole thing became deeply unsettling because the report had required my social security number. It wasn't a pleasant revelation, nor was the ensuing argument. It ripped open a festering wound, exposing my family's true avarice and cowardice, and my disdain for them grew tenfold. For the next hour, they just started tearing into each other, hurling accusations back and forth. I tried to stay quiet, but sometimes their anger would turn on me. I'd just shrug or offer a nonchalant, one-word comment. My sister's husband, my brother's wife, and their 5 wide-eyed children watched in utter shock as our family, for the first time, openly disintegrated before their eyes. Our usual family gatherings were boring, predictable. My sister offered updates, my brother and his wife boasted. Mom started conversations, Dad complained. This kind of raw collapse, this open warfare, had never, ever happened at one of our dinners. It was a tumultuous meal, to say the least, as deeply ingrained issues, simmering for decades, finally exploded into the open. The customary, subtle jabs about how I should look up to my brother and be a real man were replaced by stunned silence. Then a heated disagreement erupted between my dad, my brother, and even me. They dug up every single relic of family strife from the past 30 years, arguing over who was to blame for everything. It was like watching a chaotic, unruly drama unfold in real time. In those moments, all my negative thoughts about my family felt horrifyingly validated. But honestly, even though you might expect me to feel triumphant or vindicated, I just felt terrible. I became acutely aware of how poorly I'd handled the situation. I knew all their flaws, yes, but what had I truly gained by exposing my brother's wrongdoings so publicly? His children, those innocent kids, now knew about his tumultuous, messy history, and that was something I had never wanted. The breaking point came when my brother, in a fit of pure wrath, screamed at me. His words were stunning, vicious. You should have never been born. But what truly resonated, what pierced my soul, was my parents' desperate, frantic attempts to calm him down. A level of desperation I had never, ever witnessed from them. He accused me of being the source of all the family's problems. They tried to intervene, but never once did they truly admit or accept responsibility for how they had treated me over the years. I felt simultaneously saddened, deeply wounded, and yet profoundly vindicated. It was a harsh, undeniable reminder of the deep, festering problems at the core of our family dynamic. Then my parents threw another accusation at me, pushing me past my limit. They implied I could have helped a sick niece or nephew, but chose not to. A sick niece or nephew. I had absolutely no knowledge of any such circumstance. No one had ever told me about this. No one had reached out for help. I suspected they were just making it up on the fly, but I didn't challenge it directly. Instead, I simply said, "But I thought you still believed I was working at the comic book shop." They never seemed to grasp that the store had closed in 2011, despite my countless reminders. The way they had so casually misrepresented our entire family history to fit their warped narrative absolutely appalled me. Overburdened and utterly disgusted, I got in my car and drove home. Right now, I'm feeling incredibly conflicted. Knowing they'll probably start pressuring me for money, now that they're aware of my wealth, makes me feel utterly deceived. I know exactly what's coming. I've seen how they've treated my brother in similar situations. Yet, I also recognize and value that my parents did provide for my basic needs as a child: food, clothing, a home. Navigating this labyrinth of thankfulness, bitterness, and the freshly set boundaries will be incredibly difficult. I know I'll need my therapist's help to process this profound shift in our family dynamics. It's abundantly clear that setting firm, unwavering limits going forward will be absolutely essential. Growing up was always a struggle, because to be brutally honest, I was never the favorite child. My brother tormented me, and my parents did little to stop it. They never physically beat me, but when he kicked, hit, or said truly terrible things, they reacted as if nothing was wrong, completely disregarding it. It's deeply concerning that they still don't consider verbal abuse damaging or real. Verbal abuse is horrific enough on its own, but it's infinitely more painful when the very people who are meant to protect you choose to ignore it. I've fought this battle for years, and I've had enough. Even though they are my family, I feel an overwhelming need to keep a permanent distance. I wish them well, truly, but I believe it will be better for me to move on, to begin a new chapter without them. But then my mind races to the future. What happens if I find someone amazing, a girlfriend, and we decide to get married, have kids? How will I deal with these deeply rooted family problems then? It could get incredibly complicated. I'm trying to figure it all out. How can I possibly introduce my new family to my old one if I'm not even speaking to them anymore? I have so many questions about what lies ahead. I've come to realize some harsh truths. My family never truly appreciated me as a person. They only wanted me around to validate their image. Now, with my financial success exposed, they just want to exploit my wealth. I am not defined by them. It's clear that they are the problem, not me. I'm a good-hearted, diligent person who endured decades of harsh treatment, and I've worked incredibly hard to build my own life. I need to reduce the time I spend with them, drastically. I know deep down they only want my money, and I'll communicate with them on my terms or not at all. My therapist will be crucial in helping me move into a life where they don't hold me back. I'm going to steer clear of pointless conversations, and I've even considered packing up and starting completely fresh in a new place. I know I'm not alone in having to make these tough choices. Many people struggle with their families. And when it comes to dating, I understand it will be challenging to explain these dynamics to a potential partner, especially if they have strong family ties. But I know I'll start my own family when the time is right, a healthy one. Going forward, I'm taking concrete steps. I've already put a security freeze on all my credit accounts. If my brother did use dealership resources to dig into my life, I'll notify the appropriate parties. I doubt the dealership will want to be implicated in fraud. I'm speaking with an attorney. And despite my age, I need to make sure my assets are protected. My parents are currently my default next of kin, but I'll be putting my wishes in writing, ensuring my beneficiaries are those I choose. I'm also finding a trustworthy grief counselor, because even though it's painful, I know I'll feel a deep sadness as I pull away from my family. An expert will help me process this. After that family dinner, it felt like I was leaving a war zone. I sped home across the quiet, nighttime roads, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The moment I pulled into my driveway, I knew, with absolute certainty, something had to change. If I didn't want to lose my mind, those Sunday dinners had to stop. For the next 2 weeks, I poured myself into my work and my mental well-being. My home, filled with gadgets and comic books, became more than just visually appealing. It was my sanctuary. To figure out how to separate from my family without completely severing ties, I ramped up my therapy appointments. My therapist, Dr. Bennett, was a lifesaver. He taught me methods that felt less like building a rigid wall and more like constructing a protective fort, helping me set healthy boundaries. As weeks turned into warmer weather, my thoughts began to drift towards the future, especially relationships. After so much time spent alone, I started to believe that meeting someone truly amazing wasn't just possible, but likely. And then, like something straight out of a comic book, Ava appeared. We met at a technology conference. Her cybersecurity talk captivated me, not just the topic, but her sheer charisma. She was smart, grounded, and she understood me in a way few ever had. Crucially, she had a love-centered view of family, balanced with incredibly firm boundaries. As my connection with Ava deepened, the unspoken elephant in the room was how to introduce her to my family's ongoing circus. Over countless pizza-fueled evenings, we brainstormed and decided on a strategy: short, visible, and casual family get-togethers. Everything shifted when Ava even offered to help me navigate these choppy waters. Our initial interactions were simple coffee dates. I slowly reintroduced myself to family gatherings, always with Ava by my side. Of course, the first few times were incredibly awkward. My parents were overly polite, wary, as if I might vanish at any moment. My brother seemed to be trying to express something, but he struggled to find the right words. My sister and her kids, though, were a pleasant diversion. Her middle child, the one so much like me, was instantly won over by Ava. We slowly got accustomed to these coffee dates, brief forays into family territory, a quick coming and going. This strategy allowed me to reconnect without becoming completely entangled in the chaos. Unexpectedly, it started to work. My family adjusted to the arrangement over time. Perhaps they understood that this was the only way they could still have me in their lives. They actually started to be mindful of my limits. As things continued to improve, I began to think more about the long term. What could our future hold, together with Ava? I envisioned building a solid family foundation based on mutual respect and genuine care, rather than obligation and guilt. I knew there would still be difficulties, of course. One summer evening, walking by the lake, Ava and I even talked about the prospect of living together. I was struck by how far I had come, from feeling completely abandoned by my family to standing on my own, with a clearer, stronger sense of who I was. It felt like night and day. I have a cautious sense of optimism for the future. I feel prepared, even though I know the road ahead may still be rough, with possible potholes the size of craters. Setting limits with my family, especially with Ava by my side, was more than just protecting myself. It was about making room for new connections and a truly fulfilling future. Those infamous Sunday meals are still a thing, but now they happen on my terms. I go occasionally, I skip other times. I bring Ava along to family dinners, and we openly discuss any issues that arise. Even with all this progress, there are still challenges. The secret, I'm learning, is finding that delicate balance, keeping things harmonious without ever becoming overpowered again. This is my journey still unfolding. I've walked through fire, found my strength, and started building a life I truly deserve. What do you think? Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand with your own family, or forge your own path when no one believed in you? I'd really love to hear your stories in the comments below. My family is falling apart, not with a bang, but with a calculated, painful whisper that's poisoning my children against me. The woman I'm divorcing, Daisy, is turning our kids, Peach and Mario, into pawns in a cruel game. This isn't just a challenging separation. It's rapidly spiraling into an acrimonious, brutal divorce. The core reason? Earlier this year, Daisy embraced her bisexuality and directly told me she wanted an open marriage. I was completely uncomfortable with that idea, but the real gut punch came when I discovered she'd slept with my coworker, one of my closest friends. The betrayal was crushing, a sickening blow from both my home and my workplace as a police officer. It was just too much. We couldn't stay together after that, and I needed space to process everything. At first, Daisy fought tooth and nail to keep us together. But once it became clear I was unyielding about not opening our marriage, despite her pleas, things took a truly nasty turn. Daisy became bitter, hardened. The absolute last thing I wanted, the thing I dreaded most, was for her to start using our children as pawns. But that's exactly what she did. She started telling Peach that I was making them leave our home because I no longer loved them, that I detested them, that I was destroying our family. It was absolutely heartbreaking to witness, especially seeing the raw confusion and grief on Peach's innocent face. Now, the kids frequently visit Daisy at her mother's home, where she currently lives with her new friend, AP. They go out of their way to make these visits seem like some thrilling, grand vacation, showering the kids with toys and candy. It's an obvious, sickening attempt to play the cool parents and turn Peach and Mario against me. Beyond the emotional struggle, Daisy and I clash on nearly everything. Who gets what belongings? How much financial support for whom? But the hardest, most agonizing part is trying to decide how to split up Peach and Mario's precious time. Daisy fights back against every single compromise we try to reach, almost as if she's intentionally trying to make things harder for herself and for everyone else. Lately, she's been twisting things, casting me as the villain to the kids, which is utterly unjust. For instance, Peach and Mario have started asking me if I don't like Daisy's new friend, AP, because AP seems to adore them more than I do. This kind of talk is a deeply disturbing poison in their young minds. A few weeks ago, I was deep into a huge project at work, pushing for a promotion from police officer to homicide investigator, working tons of overtime. Daisy and I had agreed the kids would stay with her during this busy period, and I'd see them on weekends. When I went to drop them off at Daisy's, Mario's eyes welled up with tears. "Are you taking us away because you hate us?" he choked out, "like your mother says?" As I handed him the large bag I'd packed. My heart shattered. I hugged him so tightly, assuring him, over and over, that I loved him more than anything. It was a bizarre, almost surreal moment. Despite my desperate efforts, visiting them last weekend was incredibly challenging. It hurt deeply that they didn't say much to me. They seemed almost reluctant to see me at all. It wasn't until today that I finally had another chance to really talk to them. As I lifted them both into my arms, I could see the profound sadness on their faces. It's clear Peach is struggling immensely. She still shows me love, but Daisy seems to be actively making it harder for her to do so. This situation is incredibly difficult, and I'm desperately trying to decide on the best course of action to minimize the harm to my children. This twisting of family dynamics is profoundly challenging. Peach is having so much trouble. She believes she's incapable of loving me. I simply cannot stand by and watch helplessly as my princess endures this pain. This divorce, meant to bring clarity, is purposefully harming them, and I'm starting to have serious doubts. Do I need to push the divorce further, protect my kids, or should I just give up and accept this cruel reality? But I can't. I won't. I'm taking this directly to my divorce attorney immediately. This is parental alienation, a deliberate act to turn my children against me, and I'm told a judge will surely order it to stop. It might be hard to enforce, but I have to start now and keep pushing. Daisy's actions are incredibly damaging, and I need to make sure I document everything, every word, every incident. This will only get worse if I stay, if I don't fight. I'm already gathering all the paperwork. My lawyer needs to know everything she's done. I'm going to seek counseling for the kids, because this is a terrible position for them to be in. They shouldn't be left with her unattended, and if necessary, I will inform Child Protective Services about her treatment of them. Never again will I let her actions go unchecked. Not for the sake of my kids. This is the nightmare I'm living right now. What would you do in my position? How do you protect your children when the person who should love them most is actively trying to poison their minds? Please tell me what you think. I really want to know.